Hello and welcome to the War 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a huge thank you to Matt Hoffman for sending in some awesome pictures of his converted Scion / Inquisitor force. I really like these army pictures. They're so cool. Firstly, the yellow colour scheme just pops, and it is really hard to do a proper yellow colour scheme. So straight away, Matt, absolutely fantastic. 2 thumbs up. In fact, if I'm a Genestealer cultist, 3 thumbs up for pulling off a very difficult yellow colour scheme. And I love all the conversions, the mixture of Palatine and Forcer bits, and then you've got like Caradon bits from Age of Sigmar and all this kind of stuff. Just looks really cool. Very nice little 500 point army. I'm sure that it will be hunting down heretics and Xenos alike in no time at all. So thanks for sending these pictures in. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page, or you can email them to me, and there'll be a link to the Facebook page and my email address down in the description below. But without further ado, let's crack on with today's video. So today, guys, I wanted to take a few minutes to just talk about the upcoming changes that have been revealed by Games Workshop to the primary and secondary missions, the 2022 Match Play Competitive Play book that will be coming out soon. Now, when this initially dropped, I, like many others, had a relatively negative reaction. I was like, oh, this just sounds like it's going to shaft guard, this doesn't look good, blah, blah, blah. But, as you guys know, I often like to digest things for a few days, like a big snake, just like digesting things for a long time. And I've kind of come through the other side, and I think that potentially these missions, especially some of the primary ones which looked a bit dodgy at first, may actually be okay for Guard. I'm not saying they're going to be fantastic, but I don't think it's as doom and gloom as my initial gut reaction was. So obviously I want to go through, I want to justify that position, and that's what I'm going to be doing in today's video. So the first thing that I want to say is that we don't yet know the full picture. Okay, we've seen 2 of the new missions. There's likely to be many more of them. So let's just, see the full picture. Let's wait to see the full picture. But based on these initial 2 missions that have been shown off, I think that there's some potentially, there's some potential here for the Guard to work it. So let's take a look. So the first new mission that they have announced is Secure Missing Artifacts. And in this mission, you score an additional 3 primary points for holding the precious objective, which is determined by your opponent before the game begins. So this mission essentially replaces priority targets. Now, what's really interesting here is that priority targets was a bit of a funny mission. You see, often there was, whether it was meant to go this way or not, often players would have a gentleman's agreement where they would pick their safe objective for priority targets, and your opponent would pick their safe objective, and you'd both be like, well, I guess we're getting 15 points this unless something goes drastically wrong. And so it was kind of a nothing objective. You could have it where people, could screw people over and whatnot. But generally speaking, it was, that wasn't really done. And people might argue collusion and whatnot like that. I'm not saying, if it's right or wrong. I'm saying that was kind of what was happening. Just speaking about the reality of the situation. And so I feel like that's got back to Games Workshop, and they've been like, right, well, we don't want people just agreeing, oh, we'll get, just sat the subjective on both to get basically at 15 points if we take it. So yeah, go for it. They want to make it so it's a bit harder. So what they've done is they've essentially made it so that now your opponent picks your precious objective. So your opponent is very unlikely to pick one that's beneficial for you, the one that's in deployment zone. Very likely your opponent is going to pick the one that's out in like no man's land to make you, basically work for it. Or they might, they might pick your home objective one, but they'll like move it out so that if you want to try and hold it, it's just going to be a bad time. So there's ways that they can do it. There's ways they can, they can sort of mess around with the mission and try and screw with you. But by and large, I think basically the precious objective, or whatever you want to call it, the priority objective, is going to be the one that's going to be in no man's land, and your opponent will inevitably move it further into no man's land to screw you over. So on the one hand, you might be like, oh, this sucks. Like, I can't just set my precious objective right. Well, if I'm going to be honest, this one, I think this change, and I could, please disagree with me. I could have misread the situation entirely, but, so please let me know if you think I'm wrong. But for me, I feel like this is a good one for Guard. And the reason why I think it's a good one for Guard is because we play the objective game, son. We play the game. You know, Guard do not have a shortage, or should not have a shortage, of objective secured bodies, which means you should be quite easily able to flood your precious objective with 50, 60 bodies and, you know, tank support and hold it, whilst at the same time basically running moving squads onto the enemy's precious objective and just denying them it. So this first mission, in my opinion, is a good one for the Guard. Okay, so, you know, please let me know if you think I've misread something, or if I've totally got the wrong end of the stick. But personally, I think this first one, that one's good for us. No longer can an opponent just sit on their back one because we're quite slow. It can take us a while to get to it. We can just flood the middle of the board, smash, 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 do what we do. You know, just take ground and never give it up. And I think that'll work really well. Now, in terms of which armies I think are going to enjoy this, I think all three of what I would call the top Guard builds will be able to go into this mission quite well. So for example, pure infantry are just going to, you know, just swarm the middle of the board. You know, hybrid Guard will be able to, you know, put enough firepower covering the middle objectives. Like the enemy tries to move onto it, you can just blow them off, and should have enough bodies to be able to take their own and hold their own. And then Scions, that's a little bit murkier. Maybe Scions would struggle with this one a little bit, but Scions generally prefer to be on the offensive, to be aggressive rather than sitting back and, you know, long range bombarding. A lot of our weaponry is 24 inches or closer range, so I feel like Scions don't mind, you know, fighting for the middle of the board as well. But it does mean you then don't have to deep strike behind enemy lines, and, you know, you potentially risk losing, you know, some guys. That way you can just stay a lot more. You can keep your force concentration really, really well. So personally, I think that's one. It works quite well. I should mention that the way that this works, by the way, is this is still a primary objective. So previously, priority objectives was a secondary you could take. That's not how it works anymore. So now primary has changed. So if you hold 1, you get 4 points. If you hold 2, you get 8 points. And if you hold more objectives, you get an additional 4 points. So it's no longer 5, 10, 15, it's 4, 8, 12. And the way you get the extra 3 points is by holding your middle objective marker. So what this, like I said, this is why it's really good for Guard, because Guard are already good at sort of messing with people's primary objectives by moving onto it. Now, not only can you really reduce the amount of points they're going to be getting, but you could just swarm the board and make sure you're getting all the primary points you could possibly want, and you're picking up that secondary, that part 2 of the primary, I should call it, rather than a secondary part of it. Don't want to get confusing with secondary objectives and whatnot. So that's really good. The second one is where people were like, okay, this is you know, profanity warning. If you've got children, cover their ears. This is dog shit. Okay, which is recover the relics. Now this one is basically reintroducing kill points, which on my gut instinct was, yeah, this is just bad. I don't like it. You know, not happy at all. But then I looked a little bit further into it. Okay, so basically how this one works is you get the now what will become 4, 8, 12 victory points. That's normal. But to get additional victory points on the primary, you get 1 additional victory point for each unit that you destroyed, or that the enemy that was destroyed in the battle round. So at first you're thinking, oh well, you know, Guard, that's not good. You know, we already bleed like no prisoners and stuff. Oh, this is not good. Oh, you know. But then I actually had a little think about this one, and I looked at the map as well. The map for this one is what I would say you play long ways. No, you deploy on the short table edge. That's the way of describing it. It's the old hammer and anvil style. If you've played like old 7th and 6th edition, sort of missions. So that's good for Guard, because if you actually take a look at what I've been using recently, which is hybrid Guard, it's been Cadians, then this mission actually isn't too bad. Okay, because on the one, firstly, it's longer. You're further away from each other. You know, you're playing on the short table edge. You're playing hammer and anvil. That table edge, that kind of deployment is really good for hybrid Guard, because it gives you more time for your manticores, gives you more time for your tank commanders to just pound the enemy into dust, to absolutely blast the crap out of them. So that's really good. So that's an advantage for one of the top 3 ways of playing Guard at the moment. And secondly, if we also go down this Cadian route a little bit more, where Cadians have moved away from using lots of little infantry squads to using bigger blobs of conscripts. And then you combine that with the fact that Leman Russes have got like a 2+ save now, and you start thinking like, okay, so my opponent really, you know, the targets I'm going to present to him are going to be things like conscript blobs. He's going to wipe out 30 conscripts in one go. I've got take cover, stratagem for them. I've got the Cadia stand stratagem for them, so I can put them just out in the open on a 3-up. If they're in cover, they'll be on a 2-up. If I put psychic barrier on them, I can get them onto like a 1-up, or I can spread those buffs out and have like multiple units on like a 2-up, a 3-up kind of thing. So you can really make those squishy infantry blobs actually quite tough, and have to kill all 30 to get them. Which is, not easy for a lot of armies. If you're facing a combat army, you just screen out with one big blob of conscripts, especially on this map, because, it's a less wide frontage, a narrow frontage. You can easily screen with just one, at most 2 units of conscripts. So your opponent won't, may struggle to actually max out the points here. Secondly, so not only can you, and third thing to mention, I should say, is you've got the long range bombardment, you've got the fact that you can, Russ is on a 2-up save, so they're harder to kill, and you've got the fact that, infantry can now be taken in bigger blobs reliably, so that's harder for your opponent to really work on. And the third thing to mention is, if you look at the objectives on this board, 3 of them, you don't need to go past the halfway point. You do not need to advance past the halfway point if you don't want to. There's 1 in your deployment zone, and there's 2 8 inches from the centre coming back towards you, which is only like 4 inches outside of your deployment zone, so you can just move on to it turn 1. So again, with Hybrid Guard, the army that likes to just kind of sit back, shoot the crap out of people, and gain points back, in later turns, this is actually not a bad mission for you at all, because you can feed the enemy difficult to kill units. They're not going to get your infantry squads unless you want them to. They're not going to get your Manticores, which are the 2 units which are likely to give up, part 2 primary points of this. So actually, this isn't too bad. If you look at the last few tournaments I've been to, I have outkilled my opponents. I've outkilled them. So actually, if you build your guard army going down this Cadian firepower hybrid route, which I've had lots of positive feedback, by the way, it's not just me who's done okay with it. I've had lots of people in the comments say, oh, this list is really good, it really slaps, it really works, it's got deadly firepower. It was great to hear that, it's not just, me in a vacuum finding these things. It's just not my sort of meta. It is being, people find success wider, so that's good to know. And that indicates, that sort of feeds into what I'm saying here, which is like, guard has the firepower, and this mission allows you to sit back for a couple of turns. So you might actually be okay here. At the very least, you should be breaking even with your opponent, right? You should be breaking even with him. If people want to get into a firefight with guard will win. If people want to assault us, that means they're going to be out and exposed, which means we can blast the crap out of them. There are some armies where this isn't going to work. Obviously, Custodies is going to be like a problem. They are coming out soon, so who knows what they'll be like. But if you look at what they've kind of revealed with the Custodian stuff, they're actually pushing not the Sisters of Silence stuff. And that makes me think that they're not going to be as durable, which means that maybe Custodians won't be as good as missions people think they're going to be. So we'll have to see how it goes, obviously. But my doom and gloom upon this one, based on my recent tournament performance and recent experience with the Cadians, it's not as bad. I'm not actually as hard up on this objective as people might think. Now, if we go, so that's the new primary objectives, and apologies if I've been a bit confusing saying primary, secondary. Basically, primary objectives now have 2 parts. And the mission part is now baked into the primary part rather than being its own separate secondary. So you've got primary part 1s and primary part 2s. That's what I'd call them. They probably should just call it primary, secondary, and tertiary objectives now. That would kind of make sense, but whatever. What do I know? So now, if we take a look at some of the secondary objectives which have changed. So some have changed, some haven't changed. So the first one to say is Stranglehold hasn't changed, behind enemy lines hasn't changed. Engage on all fronts has changed. You still get 2 and you get 3 as per normal, but in order for you to count it, you've got to have at least 3 models or a vehicle or a monster. Guard, that's not too bad. If you're getting engaged on all fronts, you're either doing it with fast moving vehicles, like, well, you're not really going to take Valkyries anymore, but you might do. But the point is that like if you're doing it with like Scions, that's fine. That's okay. You've got 5 men in a unit there. So the next thing, so that's, we don't really, it's not like this, what this screws over is things like Lictors, or like little units of 2 drones. That's what this screws over. To the last, not changed. Grind them down, not changed. No prisoners has changed, and not in the better for Horde armies. So it still scores as it has been, but at the end of the game now, you score an additional victory point if you killed 50 to 99 wounds worth of enemies, or 2 extra points if you killed 100 wounds. So I've seen people say like this is now you get that like each round or something crazy. I don't know. The way I understand No Prisoners worked is it's calculated at the end of the game. You keep your tallies, and then basically if your tally reaches a certain point, that's when you get a victory point. So I understand this is No Prisoners is calculated at the end of the game, and so basically if you get to the end of the game and you've killed 50 wounds worth of stuff, you'll get a victory point, and if you've killed 100 wounds worth of stuff, you'll get 2 extra victory points. Now, this, on the surface, is like, oh, God, we've been shafted again. But, again, I kind of disagree, okay? Because we were already basically totally beansed when it came to No Prisoners. Whether we were running Hybrid Guard or Pure Infantry Guard, didn't really make a huge difference. Most of the time, you were giving up, max VP for it. I always say with my hybrid guard, I like to run with like 150 guys. That was basically giving up max no prisoners. I'm still giving up max no prisoners. This might be a bit of a kick in the teeth for Scions, who like to run like sort of 70 models. So rather than giving away like 7 victory points, you'll give away 8. So it's already, it might shaft them a little bit. It might make hybrid guard, if you run like 120 bodies, you're going to give away 14 points rather than 12. It isn't great, don't get me wrong, but it's all, No Prisoners was already a really bad one for us. The fact it's got worse doesn't, in my opinion, really change anything. One thing I would say, which is really, based on tournament experience, what's really something you want to keep in mind is actually, in the last few tournaments that I've been to, I kid you not, when I've had hundreds and hundreds of, the last tournament I went to when I had literally, my pure infantry guard, it was a fun event, but I still took pure infantry guard, no one took no prisoners against me. In the last 2 events when I've run hybrid guard, no one took no prisoners against me. Okay? Or maybe like they took it like, out of the last 15 games, it might have been taken once or twice. And you might be thinking, that's mad. Surely it's an auto pick, right? People weren't taking Bring It Down against me. The one guy that took Bring It Down against me when I was running all, 15 points to tanks, barely scored any. Okay, why are people not taking No Prisoners? Why are people not taking Bring It Down, even though you think they were great choices going in against Guard? I'll tell you why. Because No Prisoners and Grind Them Down require interaction with your opponent. And most people don't want to score that way. Most top lists don't really score that way. Most top lists, when they're being written, are going into a game with the specific secondaries they want to score, and most of the time that includes codex specific ones. Why would a Grey Knight player risk taking no prisoners when he could just take his psychic wand that basically gives him maximum 15 every single game, which he's pretty much guaranteed to get max 15 every game on that one. So why would he take the no prisoners? He's got a better one that I can't stop him from scoring. No prisoners, you can deny your opponent points. If you get really ahead on points, your opponent's trying to scrabble around getting last few points here and there, you just move units back. You just drive backwards. You just do a fighting retreat if you need to. You can deny your opponent no prisoners. You can deny your opponent Bring It Down. But you can't deny your opponent things like Spread the Sickness. And those are the objectives that people are taking. Look at Spread the Sickness. Look at Mutate the Ground for Thousand Suns. Look at Dark Elder, Herd the Prey. I think that's the one it's called. Look at the Grey Knight one. Look at the Dark Angels one, where you just set an objective and get like 15 points and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? Now I think that might have changed slightly, but my point is like, people aren't taking no prisoners because they've got better ones in their book. So this getting worse for Horde armies and worse for Guard doesn't really matter. You know what's interesting? I often take no prisoners. Why do I often take no prisoners? Because I haven't got a 9th edition codex. I'm in the Guard, son. Which means I often don't have a good 3rd one to pick. So I often sort of look at my opponent's army like, well, at least if I'm killing stuff, I'll get, 5 or 6 or 7 victory points for it. I take no prisoners. This objective is better for me. Because when I'm running against armies which are like Grey Knights, which are like 1,000 Suns using loads of Scab Occult Terminators, like Marines and all, you know, you still, no matter how, you know, no matter what people say, you're still going to come across, you know, Marine players pretty much every tournament you go to. What about Hive Guard? Hive Guard are a big problem at the moment. This is great against them. Last 2 times I played Hive Guard spam, I took no prisoners against them both times. You know? This actually, in my opinion, and I'm happy to be proven wrong, this will actually end up being better for guard armies and horde armies, because they were already giving up more, you know, max points for it, but now everyone else is giving up more points for it. And for those codices which don't have a good codex secondaries to pick, this is actually better for us. That's based on my frontline tournament experience. Please let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Okay, like I said, most people don't want to take killing objectives. Most people want to take, you know, ones that they could score without you being able to stop them. Okay, so moving on, Purge the Enemy. Yeah, Assassination, not changed. Tide Slayer, not changed. Bring it down. So this has changed. A lot of people are going, oh, God, it's buggered again. And I'm like, well, yes and no. So they've changed it so basically, vehicle. It used to be if you had 11 or more wounds, you gave away 2 points. Whereas now, it's if you've got 10 or more wounds. So the problem with that is now things like Chimeras are going to give up 2 points. And things like, you know, raid. The reason they've done it is to shaft raider spam. So if some Dark Elder player, a lot of Dark Elder players basically went, I'm not going to put witches in these raiders anymore. I'm going to put Cabalites in them. And I'm going to take basically the same army. And so what this basically does is go, no. The raider is now, if you take 6 raiders, you're going to be giving up 12 victory points rather than 6 victory points. So you better be aware of that. And raiders aren't that hard to kill. Yeah, well, they can be. You know, they can be -1 and 5 to them. But by and large, you know, for good battle, good battle cannon volley, you know, hail of fire, whatnot, you tend to be able to bring them down, right? So bring it down. So on the one hand, you might think this has shafted me and my Chimera army, but on the other hand, let me put it to you, which is Hybrid Guard was already giving up. You know, if you look, it was already giving up. Sorry, that's not the right way of approaching it. What vehicles were appearing in top tier lists? You weren't really taking a lot of Chimeras. You were taking Lehman Russes. You were taking tank command. You know, I'm not saying basically Russes. You were taking tank commanders. I was taking tank commanders. I was taking manticores. I wasn't taking Chimeras. Chimeras were already a suboptimal choice. You know, taking a mechanized company. I did it. It was fun, but the Chimeras didn't really do a huge amount. So the fact that they give up, you know, if I'm taking this seriously and we're talking about competitive play, not casual play, then this hasn't changed anything because I wasn't taking Chimeras. I was taking Lehman Russes and manticores. So this doesn't change anything for my Acadians. This doesn't change anything for my pure infantry. Does it change things for my scions? Yeah, it does. So previously I would take 5 Taurox Primes with my scions. And I still probably am going to take 5 Taurox Primes because it gives up, you know, it only gives up 10 victory points. It does mean that now my opponent might pick it because I'm not getting 5 points for Bring It Down. Now I'm getting 10 points against all these little Taurox Primes. But let me refer you to the previous really long-winded point I made, which was people aren't really taking Bring It Down. People aren't really taking No Prisoners. People are taking their Codex ones. You know, and obviously we're talking about the majority of cases. There will always be fringe cases where someone's like, right, yeah, I'm going to Bring It Down, No Prisoners against you. Ha! You know, there will be times when people do that, you know. But I'm talking about the majority of games that I've played at tournaments, and people didn't really take Bring It Down, and people didn't really take No Prisoners. And if people, you know, and this objective for the armies that I have been running personally, 2 out of 3 of the best ways that I've found to run guard aren't affected by this. And the last one, sure, I give away 10 victory points, but it's not as good as if someone takes that, you know, psychic secondary that gets them 15 for just, you know, doing a psychic action on an objective or for spreading the sickness. People might consider it for half a second longer, but personally, I'm not seeing it. So now we've got moving on. We've got Shadow Operations, Raise the Banners, no change, great. Deploy Teleporter Homers. It's way better now. So deploy teleport homers it completes at the end of your turn, and you can only do it with a unit with the troops battlefield roll. Basically, this is going to replace Rod, because Rod got, you know, screwed over. It's now, Rod is not Rod. Rod is now RND, retrieve Nachman data, and you're never going to take it, basically. Because basically it works how it did, but now you roll a dice, and if you subtract it, it's like roll a dice, and you have to roll under like the troop battle, the number of models in the unit to get it off. So characters can't rod anymore, whereas previously they couldn't rod anyway. So characters can rod, but they're very, very unlikely to pull to do it, because they need to get a re-roll. They need to get a roll of 1. Like Scions can still do it, because they'll drop in with like 5 men and they'll like pull it off. You know, that's, you know, they're likely to pull it off. But realistically, you're going to want to take deploy teleporter homers, because you can max deploy teleporter homers in a game. You can get full 15 for it, whereas, you know, R&D caps out at 12. So in my opinion, you're going to take deploy teleporter homers now instead. And it's like doing Rod, but better. So you can get Behold the Witch hasn't changed. Psychic Interrogation no longer requires line of sight. I never took it. It might be a good one. Pierce the Veil, Warp Ritual haven't changed. So overall, I actually feel like, whilst on the surface it might look like these are a big bag of dog shit for Guard, I actually, upon closer inspection and actually separating sort of theory from reality, which is, as I've said, these actually might turn out to be better for Guard. I mean, obviously, you know, you might be like, oh, Mordian, you always think everything's going to be better for Guard. Well, you know, the win rate has been picking up, guys. You know, we've gone from 22% to 42, 45% consistently. I think this will actually help us. I think we'll be able to get more no prisoners from elite armies. They'll just get the same amount from us if they even pick it. Bring it down. It's not going to affect my particular armies, not the armies that I recommend people take, because, you know, chimeras, you don't really need them. You might as well have, you know, infantry moving around, even with the new tank orders and whatnot. Typically, you're still going to want to use those tank orders on tank commanders. You know, Rod, you just go and deploy teleporters. Banners, we already were taking. You know, so like I said, I think overall, whilst this looks like doom and gloom, if you scratch by the surface, it's really not as bad as everyone thinks it is. But I could be wrong. I could be very, very wrong. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. I'm actually looking forward to these changes. I think, surprisingly, they won't be super impactful. But we shall see. We could, as I always say, could look back on this video in 6 months' time and laugh heartily at my expense. And I'm willing to hold my hands up. I was totally wrong about the way Orcs was going to go. Totally wrong. And I hold my hands up about that. So we'll have to see, won't we? Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. And of course, I'll see you guys next time.